Today we're going to talk about something that a lot of people just take for granted as something that actually happens in the real world and a lot more often than you think. And that is, why would a witness lie? We're going to look at the case of a man who was falsely convicted based on a blind witness's eyewitness testimony, as well as what they testified to in court and what other eyewitness testimony was ignored. But I want to put it into the context of the big picture. Because even though we're going to talk about one situation today, and I'm going to do a series of these videos, I want it to be clear that this is not just a rarity. It's not just an isolated incident. And I do want to make an important distinction that we're not just talking about exoneration in the literal definition of the word. We're talking about exonerations in the context of the criminal justice system, meaning exonerations where a criminal conviction is reversed. When someone is exonerated, it means they have been fully cleared of a prior accusation and found innocent of a crime after being found guilty of it. And then in looking at the data here from the University of Michigan, the X and Y axis down here, it starts with 0. I just have it blocked with my screen. That way it's bigger for you guys. We're looking at a total of 3,519 exonerations. And it's grouped by these different contributing factors. So mistaken witness ID was 27%. Perjury or false accusation is 64%. False confession is 13%. False or misleading forensic evidence is 29%. And official misconduct is 60%. Now, if you're wondering, hey, that's more than 100%, yes, because with an exoneration, more than one of these could be a factor in the exoneration. There's also another interesting chart here that shows percent of exonerations by the contributing factor and type of crime. So if you look at child SA, we see the number one reason is perjury or false accusation is the leading contributing factor. Also in the running are false or misleading forensic evidence, and official misconduct. If we go over to SA, the leading contributing factor is mistaken witness ID, but we also have 3 in the running here for perjury or false accusations at 45%, false or misleading forensic evidence at 38%, and official misconduct at 42%. If we go over to homicide, 2 stand out here. You have perjury or false accusation at 72%, and official misconduct at 74%. Drug possession or sale, perjury or false accusation leads at 65%, and close behind is official misconduct at 64%. And if you go over to other crimes, again, leading is perjury or false accusations as a contributing factor, and then official misconduct for 48% for both of those. And then not too far behind is mistaken witness ID. So that's a big picture look at some of the overhead statistics when it comes to exonerations, at least with United States data. And I think we have a major problem because we in the United States have a system where most people, when they're charged with something like a homicide or an SA and it goes to trial, they sit in front of a jury who is asked to weigh the evidence. They are the finder of fact. And jurors are supposed to weigh the credibility of the witnesses that testify at trial. But oftentimes when I'm looking around social media reactions and someone's accused of one of these major crimes, we see sentiments like, why would they lie about that? Why would someone make up an accusation? Why would a witness lie? Why would someone perjure themselves? Why would people conspire? Why would, there's a whole bunch of things that come up. And this is going to be the first in a series of things that I talk about often over on X in text, but I'm going to start doing videos on this stuff. Every time I see one of these situations, why would a witness lie? Why would someone bring a false accusation? We've got to talk about it because this is people's lives at stake. And when I say that this is real lives that are affected, the University of Michigan has this data here in the ticker on their website. 3,519 exonerations since 1989. That's not that long ago. And total for those exonerees, more than 31,900 years are lost because these individuals were serving time in prison for crimes they did not commit, but they were convicted because of any one of the contributing factors that we just looked at. So that's my big picture spiel, and I'm going to continue to do stories like this in video format to get the conversation going, raise awareness, and bring attention to the idea that these things happen. And just because you don't know, I'm not saying you personally, but there are people out there that don't know what it's like to have someone lie on them. They don't understand why someone would lie. And that type of mentality is exactly what can get an innocent person to not be believed and to be imprisoned falsely for something they didn't do. So I think it's important that we raise awareness and bring justice to people that have stories like who we're going to talk about today, Mr. Harris. So I'm going to put this into reader mode so it's easier to read. But we have man convicted of Chicago murder based on blind witnesses' testimony sues city and police. A Chicago man convicted of murder based in part on testimony from a legally blind eyewitness is suing the city and the police department. A judge convicted Darien Harris in 2014 in connection with a fatal shooting at a Southside gas station in 2011. He was 12 years into a 76-year prison sentence when he was freed in December. That would mean, if he was not exonerated, what are we talking about, 64 more years? He already did 12, but he would have been up in there for another 64 if he wasn't exonerated. So, he was freed in December after the Exoneration Project, shout out to the Exoneration Project, showed that the eyewitness had advanced glaucoma and lied about his eyesight issues. So, it's not just mistaken identity, we don't know that I'm not good at seeing what I think, I'm not just unreliable. The witness is actually lying about his eyesight issues to buff up his testimony or her testimony. Harris was 30 years old when he went free. So he was an 18-year-old in his senior year in high school when he was convicted. And he gets out because he's exonerated, and he's 30 years old. Now, I want you to imagine how different of a person and how much experience, everything that in your life, especially if you're already 30 years old, you don't need to put your age in the comments. But just imagine losing that time period of your life between 18 and 30 years old for something you didn't even do. So Harris filed a federal civil rights lawsuit in April alleging police fabricated evidence, so we have another contributing factor, and coerced witnesses into making false statements. He told the Chicago Tribune that he is still struggling to put his life back together. I don't have any financial help. I'm still treated like a felon, so I can't get a good job. It's hard for me to get into school. I've been so lost, I feel like they took a piece of me that is hard for me to get back. A message the Associated Press left on the city's law department mainline seeking comment Monday wasn't immediately returned. The department provides attorneys for the city, its departments, and its employees. So Harris was an 18-year-old senior high school student when he was arrested. The legally blind eyewitness picked Harris out of a lineup and identified him in court. Which, guys, if you're in court, so a lineup is one thing, right? And there's all these issues surrounding police lineup identifications. But when you identify someone in court, the defendant's sitting right there on the bench. It's not like they have other people for you to choose from. So if you identify someone in court, contextually, if you're there to testify against the defendant, you can pretty much infer where the defendant's sitting in the courtroom. So not that meaningful that the witness was able to identify them in court. The eyewitness testified that he was riding his motorized scooter near the gas station when he heard gunshots and saw a person aiming a handgun. He also added that the shooter bumped into him. Harris's trial attorney asked the witness if his diabetes affected his vision. He said yes. So yes, there's something that affects my vision. But denies he had vision problems. Tomato, tomato. But the man's doctor deemed him legally blind 9 years before the incident, court records show. So, this witness, yeah, diabetes affects my eyesight, but I don't have vision problems. But you also went to a doctor and were deemed legally blind 9 years before the incident, court records show. Which is curious because maybe that's why you're using a motorized scooter. I don't know the licensing situation around this type of thing, but maybe you no longer had a license to operate a motor vehicle, an automobile. So you're using a motorized scooter because you remember, you're diagnosed as legally blind 9 years ago. But you still deny in court when this man's life is on the line that you have vision problems. Now what's the extra kicker here? We have another eyewitness, a gas station attendant, also testified that Harris wasn't the shooter. So you have another witness that says that wasn't the shooter. It seems they did not find this gas station attendant credible. I want to jump over to this article from the Chicago Tribune that's going to talk about more on the police side of things, that other contributing factor here in this exoneration. So remember, Darien Harris is suing the city of Chicago and several police officers over their handling of the murder investigation. He's seeking compensation in a federal civil rights lawsuit that alleges authorities framed him despite evidence of his innocence. So they knew and framed me anyway. And here we have a little bit more of details about the case. So police ended up arresting Harris in response to an ambush-style attack at a gas station that left one man dead and another seriously injured in 2011. And then his convictions were for first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and aggravated battery with a firearm. So that's what he was actually convicted of. And although his convictions were vacated and prosecutors dropped all charges, the application for her certificate of innocence is still pending. While incarcerated, Harris received his GED, worked jobs, and completed other educational programs. Now, what is his federal complaint alleging? Well, Harris is alleging that his conviction was the result of egregious misconduct by police who fabricated evidence, including false witness statements, and identifications through such tactics as coercion, threats, fact-feeding, and promises of leniency. It argues that Harris's wrongful conviction was not an isolated incident, but rather part of patterns and practices of systemic police misconduct at Area 2 headquarters. Because remember, this is in Cook County. Authorities lacked physical evidence linking Harris to the shooting, but the judge at the bench trial said that he based his ruling primarily on the testimony of Dexter Saffold, a man who picked Harris out of a police lineup and identified him in court. The judge was unaware during the trial that Saffold was legally blind because of glaucoma. And here, I think this is actually an important distinction. At the end of this sentence here, it says, in winning Harris his freedom last year, attorney Lauren Myerscough-Mueller successfully argued that he was wrongfully convicted based on the eyewitness testimony, the mistaken eyewitness testimony, as well as police misconduct. So here it's saying that the allegations of the police misconduct were part of the successful argument to overturn the conviction. So two contributing factors. So then we get this bit here about what actually was testified to by Saffold. So Saffold testified in 2014 that he was riding his motorized scooter north on Stony Island Avenue near the gas station on June 7th, 2011, when he heard gunshots and saw someone about 18 feet away, who was aiming a handgun at a person near a car with its hood up. He also said the shooter bumped into him while running away, nearly dropping the gun while trying to put it into a pocket. Now, what do you do when you're running and you drop something? You're running and then you're leaning down to get it, so your face might not be visible. And then this guy has bad eyesight anyway. So, Saffold's eyesight came up only briefly during the trial. Harris's original attorneys asked Saffold if his diabetes affected his vision. He replied yes, then paused, and then denied that he had vision problems. Saffold's doctor had deemed him legally blind some 9 years before the slaying, court records show. In more recent years, Harris's lawyers cited medical records dating to 2002 that Saffold had publicly filed in various lawsuits regarding his disability. An ophthalmologist also offered his expert opinion that Saffold was legally blind for years leading up to the crime. So faced with the new evidence, prosecutors last year did not fight Harris's release. They declined to comment on whether they will object to his recent request for a certificate of innocence, which will help Harris expunge his record. So that's why he's saying, Harris says, I'm still being looked at like a felon. Because that's going to come up when you apply for jobs or you apply, he says he's going back to school. That could affect your, you apply for certain loans and financial aid. That felon status is still hanging over him, even though he was exonerated because he does not yet have his record expunged. Now, they say that the station's surveillance system did not capture the shooting, but prosecutors said the video did show an individual walking away from a black Lexus and around the gas station toward the area where the shooting occurred, then running away shortly afterward. The video showed a man whose thin build and short hairstyle generally fit Harris, but the suspect's face was not visible. Moore, who was shot 3 times, ran from the gas station and died in a nearby parking lot. The mechanic survived bullet wounds to his back and an arm. And now we're going to get to the police misconduct. So prosecutors previously maintained that they had credible evidence from other eyewitnesses that pointed to Harris's guilt. But the federal lawsuit alleges police misconduct played a role in those identifications. The alleged getaway driver, who has since died, took the stand during Harris's trial and recanted his initial identification of Harris. He said Harris was never in his car, and police officers coerced him into making a false identification. Police detectives denied this at the 2014 trial that they pressured the man to identify Harris. Harris's lawyers have argued that the actual offender was a teenager who was killed several months later in another Chicago shooting. An employee of the gas station has identified that man as the shooter, not Harris. The employee, who did not testify at Harris's 2014 trial, alleges that police tried to coerce him into making a false identification. So maybe in the original trial, I guess, I said earlier when we started this video, they believed the one eyewitness over the other. But it turns out that this eyewitness didn't actually testify at trial. Why is that? Was he scared to testify because the police were trying to coerce him? Did they not call him? Did they withhold this evidence? Like, that's a big deal. So shout out to Darien Harris. This man lost 12 years of his life, and just because he's exonerated doesn't mean his life is just going to start back where it left off. But here he is right after being freed from prison. This is December 22nd, 2023. Smiling, he's looking up, he's wearing a goat shirt. He never should have to be in this position. But why is he here? Why is he here? And it's not just why would a witness lie, it's also why do police coerce witnesses to misidentify or make a false identification? That's a systemic problem. So we had a witness who lied, he made a bad ID, and then he lied about the reliability of his ID. That's a problem on its own over here. But then we also have police misconduct, and that's a moving part of the civil suit that Darien Harris is currently bringing forward. And from what I'm seeing, I really hope he succeeds. With that being said, I really hope that you enjoy content like this. This is really what I'm passionate about. I love the Innocence Project. I'm learning more about the Exoneration Project and what they do. And I've always been a fan of University of Michigan's data. They track false exonerations and their causes as exonerations are made. So that data has really been helpful in different things that I've looked at over the years. But I really feel compelled to talk about stories like this more because people really think that false accusations are rare, and false convictions are rare, and false arrests are rare. And they're really not. And from my perspective, if you go back to the statistic from the University of Michigan, more than 30,000 years lost by people that were falsely convicted and exonerated. That's only the data from people that have been exonerated. 30,000 years lost. So the idea that it's rare, which I'm disagreeing with more and more as time goes on. The number, the frequency, the rate of false arrests, false convictions, false accusations seems to climb a little bit upward every time I see a new report. But I constantly see people on social media say things like, oh, well, it's just a rarity, so no big deal, oh well. Well, even if it was super, super rare, like an improbable possibility, which it's not even close to an improbable possibility, it's a reality. But even if we accepted the idea that it was an improbable possibility, in fact, borderline impossible, that's how rare it was, does that make it okay for someone to lose their years off their life because of bad police work, prosecutorial misconduct, a witness that lied, multiple witnesses that lie? And should we just sit here on the outside and say, oh, no big deal, or, well, why would a witness lie? Why would someone do their job wrong? Why would the investigation not be proper? Why would a prosecution even bring charges if there wasn't proof of guilt? We are in a country where not only are we supposed to remember that in the criminal justice system, you are innocent until proven guilty, but sometimes you're still innocent even when you're convicted. So, as a closing note, let me know what you think about this specific case or the idea, the topic of exonerations and how people get falsely accused and convicted in the first place. Let me know any and all of your thoughts. Until next time, guys, because I'm going to do more videos on why would this happen. I'm going to do way more because it's an important topic. Until the next one, though, you guys all take care. Have a good one and see you next time. Bye.